Whitney was in the courtroom all day and for the last few weeks as that verdict was read just minutes ago.
She joins us live tonight with the very latest. Brianna.
Wow, okay, so that was a big moment, obviously, in this trial, guilty. And I can tell you, inside the courtroom when that verdict was read, you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet, and nobody reacted afterwards either. It was like you were almost absorbing what had just happened. There was no audible reaction from Lori. There was no audible reaction from family and the members of the public who were in the courtroom. But then it got very interesting. So the next phase that would have happened is the aggravation phase, the sentencing phase. And what they were going to do was start that immediately. They brought the jury back in, and they were going to hear basically like a mini trial. And that would have been where the prosecution brings in two witnesses. We know Kay Woodcock, Charles Vallow's sister, was set to be one of those witnesses that then they could use as aggravating factors for a higher sentence. And they did not do that because Lori Vallow Daybell stipulated to three of these aggravating factors: that it was with a deadly weapon, that it caused emotional harm, and that there was an accomplice in this crime. Because of that, now the judge will decide if there are more aggravating factors that could up this actual sentence in the end. So this aggravating phase that was supposed to happen just completely was put to a stop, and Lori Vallow Daybell made the decision to have the sentencing come after her second trial, the attempted shooting on Brandon Boudreaux. Everybody is starting to come out of the courtroom now, including the jurors, and we have some sound from one of them. Everybody just went to talk to him. Let's get some of that sound now.
That was the triggerman. So many players were referenced in this trial, and you never saw them and never heard from them. That had to be confusing when you guys got back in the jury room. Yeah?
Yeah. It was very confusing. It just felt like there was so much of the story that was missing.
Right.
Did she have any valid arguments, like anything that made you think maybe she's not guilty?
Do you want to answer? I can't think of any.
You know, honestly, up until yesterday, I would have said not guilty. But when the prosecutor, I don't know, what do they call that? When they give their
closing argument.
Yeah. Yes, the closing argument. That's really, there's a few things she said in there, and then when I looked them up today, I was like, oh yeah, that's bad.
You were still on the fence yesterday.
I was yesterday, yes.
Wow.
Give us a sense of what it was like to be in that jury room. Was there a point that someone was disagreeing, saying that maybe she is not guilty?
Yes.
Were you guys
there was a couple.
And what was that like? Walk us through that.
It's just a matter of, adults working things out and going through all the evidence and figuring out, what we thought, what we were going to come to an agreement with. So
to learn now that everyone that was in that house that day, minus Daybell, is all not with us anymore, is dead or has been killed. I mean, what is that like to hear as jurors walking out?
Sad. Like, I kept wanting to hear from Tylee.
I was going to ask, is anybody wondering why Tylee wasn't testifying?
Yes.
You were.
Did you ever ask the judge why aren't they here?
No. And the one witness that really got to me was hearing Kay. I was holding back my emotions.
Thank you guys.
Can y'all spell your names for us?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us your name. Your
first name's Carl, K-A-R-L.
And your last name, are you comfortable sharing that?
No.
Okay.
Victoria Lewis, Lewis.
Thank you guys.
Don't live here.
I know this is a lot.
Okay, so you heard a lot of what we were just talking about throughout this entire trial. Those jurors had the same questions we thought they might. Where was Tylee? Why was she not testifying? We feel like there are missing parts of this story, missing players that we don't know about. And you also heard that Kay Woodcock was some of the most powerful testimony for these jurors to hear. That was very interesting to get their standpoint on how they felt. One of them saying they actually thought possibly not guilty up until the closing arguments. So I guess Trina Kay probably really really sealed the deal there with all the evidence that she presented. They also said those texts were part of the main reason why they came to the guilty verdict. Again, those texts saying, be like Nephi, I'm going to be like Nephi, you're going to be like Nephi, all of that referencing a character in the Book of Mormon that was a justified killing. And I was talking about yesterday, I thought that the texts, those kind of twisted religious texts, were probably the crux of this case, and it does sound like the jurors also felt the same exact way, that they were looking at those and felt that they could see the nuance of what that meant within those. But I think it's interesting, I mean, when you look at this from Lori Vallow Daybell's side, if one of those jurors was saying they were still unsure up until closing arguments, one could say that Lori might have done a better job than they thought at being her own attorney if the jurors were questioning this up until yesterday. So that was very telling, but I think we all knew that it was likely that this jury was probably feeling like there were so many things missing from this case, notably no Tylee Ryan and no Alex Cox. And Alex Cox, of course, being the shooter in this crime, the one that was allegedly standing, or not allegedly now, would have been found proven that he was standing above Charles Vallow when he fired that second shot, not being self-defense. So as people are coming out, we're interviewing them as we go. We've got a team here on the ground getting this all together for you. I want to actually send you guys to our next soundbite, another juror coming out expressing what they thought after today and coming to a guilty verdict. Take a listen.
Why she didn't, stuff like that.
And do you understand now that every other witness that was there that day is now dead?
Yes.
When did you learn that?
At the end, when we first were walking out, everyone was talking about it, and we got told to look up her previous stuff so that we were aware.
And in that jury room, this woman's been convicted of 3 homicides. You guys didn't know that. You were unaware. None of you guys knew that.
Correct. Yeah.
I know.
Yep.
And then hearing all the missing pieces in the trial, the people who didn't testify, there were a lot of holes when you went into the jury room.
Yeah.
Were not explained to you. That must have made it far more difficult.
It did, which is why we went back through everything, just to make sure we didn't miss anything, to make sure that we were 100% on what we were choosing to do.
Was there anything that made you think she might not be guilty?
No.
When you went back to the deliberation room, were there any jurors that were uncertain? Some that were certain? Where did you start? What was the foundation for deliberation?
I think probably 10 out of 12 of us were certain. The other 2, we helped them go back to what they needed to learn to kind of make up their mind. And then, we just kind of went from there.
Did you guys look at any additional evidence once you were back there? Because I know that not all of the evidence was presented in court, and they said there was additional. Lori asked you to watch the entire interview, for example, and Trina K invited you to do the same. Did you guys do that?
We did. That was actually one of the first things we did, because what we saw was only clip-its. And going back through it, it was actually kind of the whole interview that was like that. She asked us to watch the whole thing, but the whole thing was pretty much those clip-its, other than her laughing, smiling about, she was kind of just at peace. Like, she was just sitting there, her legs were crossed, she was sitting all the way up on the seat with no shoes on, just her legs were crossed like she was in her own home.
Lori made a big deal out of being called nonchalant or calm throughout the entire trial. Didn't think it was really fair. Was that something that affected you guys, her calmness or nonchalantness?
Yes. Being that calm when everything happened, it's not something that you would normally be calm about. You'd expect to be sad, asking how your brother's doing, since he was the one that got injured during it too. She didn't do any of that. She already knew it happened, and she just went with it like that.
Did you want her to testify?
I guess, I don't know. Yes, seeing Charles's sister's reaction when they did say she pled guilty was really relieving. It made all of us feel really good that they got justice.
Can we get your first and last name?
Natasha Smith.
Natasha Smith.
Also known as Tosh Reed Tucker, though.
Tosh Reed Tucker?
Yes.
Can you spell that?
TASS, and then my last name is Reed Tucker.
Wow. Okay. So listening to that, very telling. She said that there were 10 to 12. There are 10 jurors, 10 to 12 that were certain. They had to help 2 jurors who were on the fence re-go over the information, re-go over the evidence, and help them come to that unanimous decision for the guilty verdict. So most of that jury was convinced when they went into the room today that she was guilty. There were 2 jurors that were on the fence. That was very interesting for us to just learn here live together. They also said they wanted to go over everything again. And interestingly enough, that juror talked about that interrogation video. So Lori Vallow Daybell was very, very specific, wanting the jury to see the full interrogation video with Detective Inkland, the video when she was being interviewed right after Charles Vallow's death. They showed clips of that during the trial in the courtroom, but they did not show the full thing. Lori was adamant that the jury see that, so she said that they did watch it, and they found that there was really nothing different that told them any other story. They found that Lori was still laughing, still kind of feeling giddy, kind of trying to be relatable with the detective. It sounds like they didn't find anything else in there that told a different story or gave them any other idea that Lori was acting differently, maybe more upset, more stressed, more concerned about the death of her husband than anything else. So that is interesting, and now we really wonder why Lori wanted them to see that whole video if they're seeing it and they said, yeah, we're not coming to a different conclusion here. That was also very interesting. So we're getting jurors as they come out, and we're doing this live with you, and we're learning on the scene here as well. We know they came to the guilty verdict together. Of course, they had to be unanimous on this. They could not come back not unanimous, otherwise it would have been a hung jury. So they were able to convince those other 2. They all came back with a unanimous verdict. We're hearing more from the jurors. Let's listen to some more sound from them as they come out of the courtroom.
It was all about the evidence, really. You know, I mean, that's what it always boils down to. It's just the evidence, text messages and things like that.
That's what I was going to ask. Was there any specific evidence
Text
that you guys,
messages,
the
yeah.
text messages? Which one in
Absolutely.
particular? Anything that stuck out to you guys?
You know, I'm not sure I should say anything else because I risk a retrial if I say the wrong thing.
You have been released,
Yes.
but I'm not going to tell you what to say, of course. Walking out now, knowing, I mean, I think you're knowing how high profile this case was.
It's very,
What's going through your head?
sadness. It's sad. Oops, I'm sorry. It's just sad that, you know, this has happened to Charles and she's given up her life as well. You know, it's sad.
What did you think of her defending herself? Anything that went through the jury's head with that?
Well, for me personally, I thought, what does she have to lose? You know, there's guilty or not guilty. What does she have to lose? So,
were any of you folks aware that this woman had already been
I had never been
convicted
heard.
of
I have never
3
heard of her.
homicides?
Yeah, no,
and
I've
the
never heard
jurors
of her
did not
before.
know that.
No, I did not.
And
I
nobody
don't
brought
think,
it.
did you didn't
Ma'am,
know.
would you want to come in and talk too? Do you want to say anything?
Just what
was your
there's a lot of backstory here, and this woman had already been convicted of 3 homicides, and they obviously didn't want you folks to know that, and nobody knew that during your deliberations.
No.
Is that correct?
No.
Correct.
Wow.
What was this experience like for you?
It was sad, like as he said. For me, it was the text messages that did it, as far as evidence. And I feel like we uncovered some lies.
Knowing now that she was convicted of killing her 2 children in Idaho.
I haven't had a chance to Google everything. I'm sure as soon as we get on the shuttle. So might have more to say later.
Was that difficult going through this and
Yes,
not being able
it
to be
was.
disconnected?
Yeah.
What
It
do
just
you
felt
think
like there was a lot of information that didn't make sense and that was missing.
Do you think she did herself any favors by
No.
defending herself?
No.
You were not impressed with her
No.
lawyering skills?
No.
What did you think of her behavior during cross-examination, the way that at one moments she was argumentative with some of the witnesses?
I mean, many days she just was like smiling and laughing and didn't seem to take anything very seriously.
How much of that did that play into a factor in the decision?
It did.
Were you hoping to hear her testify? Were you hoping to hear her call witnesses?
I was.
And what about you?
I didn't understand why she didn't call any witnesses.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't get
Or
that.
why she didn't have, like, I know she made a statement about the only family that was interviewed was her estranged brother, and why wasn't her parents or her sister, but yet she didn't call them. So
I mean, in saying that, she is not obligated to prove her innocence.
exactly, yeah.
It's up to.
And you gave her that benefit of the doubt. She recognized she didn't have to put on the defense.
She knew.
Right,
yeah,
right.
She knew that.
Was the fact that she didn't put up a defense or take the stand in her own defense part of your deliberation at all?
No.
Did it
It was
affect-
all evidence. It was all evidence that was
Yeah.
produced and presented to us.
Sorry if this was asked. What would you say the biggest piece of evidence for you guys as a jury was when you came to the decision?
Well, for me, like her, it was text.
The
Texts
text
were
history.
damning.
What specifically about the text?
Oh, there were so
I don't know
many.
if I can do that or not. Yeah, there was.
I mean,
there
we
was
had
two of them
pages.
for me that really stood out.
Can you tell us which ones?
The Nephi.
Yeah, that was one of them. Soon you will be Nephi, and so will I. So that was one of them, but I don't know if I should say anything more than that.
We heard so much about dark spirits and religion and how this all plays into it. I mean, as a jury, what's going through your head when you start hearing that in court?
For me, that didn't really play a big role because you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy to me. To say somebody is
Was
you know,
it
possessed.
unusual for you guys to see, I mean, you're talking about her brother Alex, the guy who actually did that was the trigger man. So many players were referenced in this trial, and you never saw them and never heard
Correct.
from them. That had to be confusing when
It
you
was
guys got
very
back
confusing.
in the jury room. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very confusing.
What did
Speaking with the people that they did not hear from in this trial, that is so understandable. These jurors saying they had not heard of Lori Vallow Daybell before. They are now just learning that she's been convicted of killing her kids, convicted of killing Tammy Daybell, that Alex Cox is no longer alive, that other people in this case are no longer alive. They're telling us they were not overly impressed with her lawyer skills, and they were surprised that she did not call anyone in this case. The jurors now just learning about all this, very overwhelming for them, but we heard one of the jurors say earlier they feel relieved that there is now justice for Charles Vallow and his family, and that's really what this whole case was about. Guys, I'll send it back to you in the studio as this starts to unfold here outside the courthouse.
Well, one of those jurors, the male juror, Carl, said it best. It's just sad. There's just sadness all around. We'll continue to cover this. We'll see you on the other side of the break.